Alright, so the format, for those who haven't been here before, we have multiple things, starting from the S tier, which is an instant pickup. That's basically like any item that you see it and there's almost no reason not to take it. Chances are, if you don't take it, you're either trolling or you probably have like a very specific build in mind and you don't really want to play that day. So from there, it goes down. Try to break my game. So it's items that are good enough to actually win you a game, but it's not like the most busted piece of gear ever known to mankind. We had items that are probably good, so they aren't like actually bad. A lot of times the items don't really do anything on their own, so they end up in the B tier. C tier are even more items that usually don't really work straight out of the box. They probably need something else to actually make it into a usable item. That's not to say that it doesn't do its job. Some items are actually worse than C because not only does it need more stuff to make it work, but it's just plain bad compared to the same kind of stuff. And that's subjective, obviously. Like, again, as I go through this tier list, there's going to be a common theme where this is just a Veedotme tier list. This isn't something that you yourself should downplay of your own builds. It's really just what I feel. If you have your own S's, if you want Broadsword up here in the S, that's perfectly fine. And this is old at this point, so a lot of things have changed. So even though you're looking at this, there's really high chances that things are gonna move. Some things are gonna move up, some things are gonna move down, and that's the nature of the beast. That's why I like to do the whole thing every single time. I'm gonna be going through A to Z. It's not in alphabetical order. No, it's not. I think I have all the meme tier stuff. We don't measure these because you don't really take it in a normal run. You only take it when you actually like had a meme reason to do these. Every once in a while, I'll take a curse sword if I'm cursed. Like, if a curse sword actually drops from the chest, I'm gonna take it. Everyone's welcome to talk, throw out your own opinions. Alright, so let's go ahead and start. Balance Blade. Balance Blade, previously a D tier item. I am definitely not taking this every time. I am really struggling with Balance Blade, even to make it good. On bosses, it's actually not half bad. For example, Concierge. But really, well, Concierge, Giant, maybe Hand of the King. I feel like it's still a little tough to maintain the crits on this. I actually really wish that it wasn't on a timer. It'd be kind of cool if it was almost like it had an ammo count. So the ammo count, every time you hit, it would increase the ammo, and then once you reach to the top, then crits are enabled. So you kind of have to think about killing certain monsters on the map, and then once you get to a room, you're on like the 9th hit. And as soon as you hit it, then you have a full room that you can get crits off of. But it doesn't do that. So biome clears, I feel like it's basically a rusty knife. Like, I've never gone into a situation where I thought this Balance Blade destroyed this biome. Like, I went into Prison Depths and Balance Blade shredded all of it. And really the ultimate test to me is Prison Depths. If it can clear Prison Depths or like Graveyard, then sure, I think it's a decent item. But you take this thing versus Hammer with the Lacerator behind it, struggle street for sure. This thing is like really close to an F tier for me. I don't remember the last time I've used a Balance Blade and actually felt good about it. Twin Dagger, previously the F tier. And this is actually really sad. Twin daggers is actually one of the first items that you get in the game, and a lot of people really love the twin daggers. And it got buffed too in version 1.3 maybe. It got like a attack speed buff. And in all honesty, I actually feel like it's better than Balance Blade almost 100% of the time. There was one game where I actually took Twin Dagger into the Giant, and that felt actually halfway decent. And Balance Blade can kind of do that too. DPS-wise, you know, there's some struggle going on. Maximum DPS is 278. But when you think about losing the crits, unless you're ripping through the Giant or Timekeeper, I have a feeling that you're probably going to drop the crit at some point. Especially during the phase transitions, where you can just do this almost every single time. You can probably get the 2 attacks off, roll through, get the 3rd attack. There you go, 238. Compared to, let me spam attacks, hopefully not miss a parry, hopefully not have Concierge do the aura. I guess you could fail at that too with the the Twin Dagger. But there's not as much incentive to just keep swinging. If you get 2 hits off with the Twin Dagger, it's probably still better than 2 hits of Balance Blade. Why is Twin Dagger a D tier? Not going that far. I would say just off rip, a Twin Dagger is probably here. Like, it's enough to do basically everything in the game. But as we go through, it's actually going to begin to drop because I have other things I would take over a Twin Dagger. But I don't mind leaving it at a B, but as a spoiler, it's probably going to drop. Nutcracker, though. So we have Heart of Ice. First off, you need a Nutcracker that slows every enemy on the screen. I think that's kind of mandatory. And that's really going to spoil with all of these other, what I call two-handed weapons, but we can't call it anymore. So you may as well just call them slow weapons. Being able to slow all enemies on the screen is pretty important. Obviously, it's not enough to be an S rank. Probably not even good enough to be an A rank. So what makes it not an A rank is actually fighting bosses. The bosses will die to a Nutcracker, but not because Nutcracker is actually doing the amazing crit while it's snared. That's probably gonna wait for 10 seconds before it actually stops being frozen or stops being snared for an extended amount of time. And there's definitely no boss that will die in 10 seconds to a Nutcracker. It's probably, and what we had it as a C tier previously, and that might still be okay. I just worry that if I were to take anything that the Nutcracker would use, which is like Wolf Trap, Ice Bow, Frost Nova. We tried Seismic Strike with Nutcracker on Timekeeper, died immediately. Because this thing does not keep her snared long enough. I should also preface that this tier list is a Veedotme 4BC plus tier list, which is probably important to say. And Nutcracker does do damage. It just doesn't do a lot of damage over an extended period of time compared to other stuff, even if you have them in the Wolf Trap. So for example, if I had a Wolf Trap with a Broadsword, I would say I probably dealt more damage with Broadsword than Nutcracker overall. DPS-wise, 333 compared to flat 300. But you have to consider that after, take Timekeeper for example, after the roots are gone, while you're doing all this dodge rolling through, high probability you're not critting anymore. So, for now, I actually think this is going to be in the D. And we will continue to build up and move stuff around because there might be other things that are in the D tier. And I will actually take a Nutcracker over it. Timekeeper will probably be frozen for half a second with an ice bow. Giant doesn't get frozen at all. Hand of the King, you'll probably get a couple freezes off. Because the way how that fight plays out, it's kind of hard to just spam freeze or really anything on them. Conjunctivious, you'll get a couple because there's a lot of phase transitions there. And then Concierge is Concierge. I can't really think about that. But that's saying that this is, if I put it any higher, is better than just taking anything else with an ice bow. Another thing I can't stand, though, this right here. The Bloodsword. And I feel so bad because a lot of people vouch for Bloodswords, but I struggle with it every single time I take it. I had one person come in to tell me that I was actually using Broadsword all wrong this whole time. Like, the reason why I don't like Bloodsword is I was always using it as my main hand weapon. And they were saying, no, that's not right. You're supposed to put Bloodsword on your triangle button, load up the dot, and then start attacking with your other weapon. And you get like the 60% damage bonus. And that, sure, as a brutality weapon, loading up bleed is probably cool. But then I remember that kunai, the throwing knife, is also red, and it got buffed in 1.6. So if the argument is to use Bloodsword on the offhand, you may as well just load up with Shuriken at range, which got buffed in version 1.6. So chances are you could probably kill whatever the target is with just this. Boss-wise though, like think Giant or something like that, you can load up with throwing knives at range and then get the 60% on whatever your melee weapon is. Without having... So think about it this way. Every single swipe you do with the Bloodsword could have been another weapon. Or if you're not in range, you could be throwing knives all the way until you get to the target, and then you only have to melee it once. Compared to, I'm gonna walk up to it, I'm gonna melee it a couple of times, and then melee it with something else. And that, to me, is actually, like, awful. You might want a Bloodsword rather than kunai for pure melee for the mutations. Right, so from, like, a fun standpoint, like, I don't want to play at range, I want to use a shield, and I want to use a Bloodsword. And that's okay, but then now your melee weapon, your primary weapon, is a bleed sword. And we're playing on 1.6, and technically we have a brand new bleeding offhand right here. Bloodthirsty Shield actually got what I would call a buff. It's now red and green. So like from a fun standpoint, for someone trying to do like a specific custom mode build with nothing but melee, that's your only, well, it's not even your only option because you have Blood Shield now. Now what's actually kind of cool about this thing is the cursed version of it. I can say that a cursed Bloodsword with Hokuto bow, for example, your purple Bloodsword with Hokuto bow is actually like pretty decent, and you can get stuff like bleeding causes poisoning and stuff like that, and all of that's like really cool. I still feel like throwing knife is better with Hokuto bow, and right now I'm really trying to like debate on putting it in the F tier. Why would I take this over a balance blade? I take throwing knife every single time over this. I try my best to not spoil as much as I can. So you're hopefully gonna hear about Spike Sword later. Spartan sandals, the New Balances. Back in the day, you all know the Spartans used to be way down here, and then version 1.4 came out. They buffed the Spartan sandal, and we moved it up to the B tier. Spartan sandal, we have done it on every boss so far. If you're fighting Giant, you probably don't want to take the Spartan sandal. That's all I'm gonna say. Every other boss, except maybe Conjunctivius, is 100% doable. Actually, yeah, Conjunctivius was awful. I remember that. So 2 bosses out of what, 5? 6, quote unquote, all doable with Spartan sandals. It's not an S though. Like, I know that much. I can't leave it there. I agree that sandals are easily one of the best things to get through biomes with. This doesn't really work with Frenzy because the lifesteal works off the actual kick and not the wall slam. It does work with like Berserk and stuff like that, but for the most part, if you're actually getting hit during this, you may have made a mistake. If you have, for example, bats or something that you're trying to kill, you can probably take, honestly, really any skill. I don't know if I would take a shield, but I actually think Spartan sandals aren't half bad, and I actually think it's better than Twin Daggers at this point. The only thing Twin Daggers has over this is that Twin Daggers can fight every boss, and this can't. But Spartan sandals can fight every elite. It can fight every... So, again, Prison Depths is the actual test here. This kills Hammer, it kills Lacerator, it kills Slasher. The only thing this struggles against is the flying bats, and that is the only thing you may want to throw a grenade at. So if you can just get any skill that kills bats, you're probably gonna do really well with Spartan sandals. Nothing's really changed since 1.4 for this, but I actually think it's 100% playable almost all the time. It might fall down because of other items though, so let's keep it going. All right, that oil, that black gold, not a meme. I actually had as an S tier previously. It's really good. Like, it hasn't been nerfed yet, which is highly surprising. It got just 1 ding to its damage when it first came out. Like, that was 1 mini patch in between the beta. It launched with a buff, and then they dialed it back a little bit because it was too strong. Since then, it's pretty much stayed as is. And of course, the way this thing works is that you have to have an enemy on fire, and if it is, then you'll crit. If you don't do that, the only other thing this does is apply oil for example, ice shards. Why I had this as an S tier previously is not only does it do its job when it actually has the crit enabled, but when it doesn't, this thing actually has a DPS number. Like, it's actually, wait, wrong thing, 149. This thing actually has a DPS number. I think it's one of the higher. So Oil Sword, without critting, is actually one of the strongest single hit weapons that's in brutality and is one-handed. Without, well, I always say one-handed, but it's not slow. It's a fast item. It has high DPS even when you don't crit. Now, when you do crit, so that means when I don't have the fire, like in prison quarters, for example, or maybe even promenade, getting through those biomes is still actually possible, which is very important. And if you don't get the fire out of promenade, for example, then yeah, you might struggle in prison depths, but hopefully you got something by then to make this thing live. in my opinion, the only fire worth using is Molotov. And that's, again, using this as your primary weapon. Molotov, fire grenade, flamethrower, and then any skill that just like torches the ground on monsters that are killed. Corrupted Power can also torch a little bit, but I think that's a starter fix, so you don't really chase that. But really, half the time, I'm just taking the Molotov, the Firebrand, with the Oil Sword. Hey, Liminal. Yeah, I do know some people like to do the Fire Blast as the primary. So you do like one swipe with the oil, kill it with the Fire Blast, and then I guess the ground is ignited. So any monster that walks on the ground, you can actually attack with the Oil Sword afterward. And I think that's fine. You could probably do the same thing with like Torch, for example. I'm not 100% sure if I would do that personally, but I think it's like from a personal preference. If you'd rather do that than throwing the Molotov, I think that's perfectly valid. I actually really do like Oil Sword on S tier, namely with the Firebrand, and you also put both weapons on square. So if you change your configuration, you have both weapons on the same button. You throw the Molotov first, then it always throws it and then slashes immediately. And that will give you the crit on your second hit without having to do like any extra gameplay, not having to remember, not having to use any brain power. And that's another thing that's really important about this list. Brain usage, the lower the requirement of brain usage, the higher the tier. So it's like, if I don't have to think about it, it's actually really, really good. Compared to stuff where, okay, I have to, dash through, double tap. I only get 3 swipes though, so after the double tap, I have to dash again. Like, that's brain usage. I don't want to do that. I just want to press square and stuff dies. That's an S tier to me. And I actually think Oil Sword kind of fits into that. Firebrand is too slow. That's why I pair it with the Oil Sword. I don't do... I guess as I'm running, I'm throwing the Molotov, and then I get on top of the monster and I swipe it. Compared to doing something like Fire Blast, where you swipe and then breathe and then swipe. So I feel like that, not to say it's bad, but personally, I like the Molotov in that case. You lose a shield. Now remember, so this is actually important. Remember, back in the day, Brutality didn't have any shields. Now we have 2. We have Frontline and we have Blood Shield. And I think you could probably still use both of those with the Oil Sword. I think Oil Sword is that good that it could probably kill stuff that you parried. Broadsword. Previously an F tier. Oh, that's so sad. I flip-flop on Broadsword every single tier list. The first tier list I had as an A. The second tier list I had as an F. The third tier list, version 1.6 by the way, I think is a strong contender for going back to A. And again, thinking about it from the heavy crossbow standpoint, it needs victims slow all enemies on the screen. I think that's mandatory. If you can get that on the broadsword, very important. Now, when you're running survival, we now have a mutation called Frostbite. And Frostbite will damage every enemy on the screen if you have victim slow all enemies on the screen. Here we go, this had it. So Frostbite with a broadsword that slows all enemies on the screen is actually pretty decent at clearing the most important enemy. Y'all can see the Frostbite is enabled. I know there's a bleeding status, but that's actually Frostbite. This kills the most deadly enemy of the broadsword, which is bats. Bats versus broadsword is actually awful. So being able to kill all bats by killing something, anything with a broadsword, I think takes it at least out of F. Because we had this down here because it failed against flying enemies so badly. But now that we have Frostbite, I think it's actually fine. This was actually one thing that we learned from Forza. Forza was showing us how to prep up attacks before you actually reach an elite, for example. So before you get to the elite, it's gonna be too difficult for me to find an elite. This might be an elite right here. So let's watch the broadsword gameplay. This is survival, and I guess it has ice shield, so that makes it kind of cool. All right, so I did hit it once. Okay, apparently I don't know how to play, my bad. I think I was just testing out the capabilities. But 37,000 damage on the upswing. Now, imagine if I had attacked backwards on the frozen failed experiment and just do one single upswipe. Would probably one-shot the failed experiment. And when you start thinking about it that way, you're like, okay, I'm a little worried about like runner elites, hammer elites, all slasher elites, all these scary monsters that if I have to do all 3 hits, I'm probably gonna die. But if you just turn around, swipe, turn, up swipe, it's probably dead. And if it's not dead, it will probably die to the down swipe. And in that case, you could have just prepped both of them. And that's something that not a lot of these, only Giant Sword, Giant Killer, has that kind of gameplay to it. Everything else is just try your best. Now, I know back in the day, phaser assassin daggers were like the coolest thing. You just go behind a monster, pop it, like so cool. Never seen that before. That's amazing. And then version 1.3 I think was released, where they made it purple red combo, and then they gave us new purple mutations, which are Apex Predator, Scheme, Caltrops, and the Witch Time. I always forget the name of the dodge roll. And you would say that Assassin with Apex Predator is incredible, and it actually is. It's really strong. That's still, to me, a glass cannon build where really the only thing that's saving you is the Predator. Like, nothing about the Assassin Dagger. Like, you could, if you could kill anything with melee tactics, Predator is amazing. I don't feel as though Assassin Dagger is amazing and Predator makes it better. I think I would take Stiletto Open Wounds over Assassin Dagger, Apex Predator every day of the week. Good DPS even from the front? It is. It's not a terrible item. I just don't think I can keep it as an S anymore. it's the perfect weapon and example of reward for flawless gameplay. Yeah, Alice, but that to me is the same thing as a cursed sword. So I put it as a meme tier, not because it's a bad item, but because it's, in my opinion, the same as a cursed sword. Predator is an entrance to cursed sword runs. Nutcracker over Broadsword, yes. And that's because I can build something out of Nutcracker. I can't build anything off of this because I probably just take throwing knives instead. Except a legendary or cursed Broadsword that poisons enemies on hit. Like, that's the only Broadsword I'll take. Maybe the one with extended bleed, but it's gotta have that starter fix, or else I'm just gonna take throwing knife instead. How much damage does it do on brutality versus tactics? I did have some questions, one of these tier lists, where people were saying maybe I should split it between the brutality version or the tactics version, and I try not to do that. Like, the best thing I can do is try to average it between each other. So say for example, purple assassin dagger was the most disgusting thing ever. Like, Apex Predator made assassin dagger like way strong, instant S. Every time you take that, you just win the game. And then the brutality version is like, okay, now that I don't have Predator, it's got to be like a B or lower. So I try to average that out and turn it into an A. This Broadsword, for example, there's purple and green. And I feel like both are equally as good. Green probably a little better, but not enough to throw it down into the B. This thing, though, I actually might even move it down further. I know it's good. I think it's better than this overall, but it's not an S anymore for me. Yeah, red-green for Broadsword. My bad. Let's keep it going. Frantic. Frantic actually got another buff. No, it only got one buff. C tier. So, I actually still don't mind Frantic Sword, even when you don't have the crits enabled. It's actually at 137, so it's just behind Oil Sword. It can pretty much kill everything in Prison Quarters. It can kill everything in Prison and Promenade. Once you get to Prison Depths, it's probably going to be a little more difficult. So at that point, I would probably not take it over an Oil Sword. Now, what this thing actually is good for now that's buffed, because back in the day, the argument was, okay, we're supposed to have 50% health and like float on that. But then they came out with Frenzy. And at that point, it's like, Frenzy is so good, why would I ever want to stay at half health? So then they buffed it to where now, if you have melees over half, it will crit. And that's actually not half bad. Especially when you're running... I guess you can run either. Because if you think about it, tactics, if you're already super high on melees when you're playing tactics, it doesn't really matter because any hit you take is close to death. So it's probably okay in that standpoint. The question is, would I rather just play something else? And I want to say yes, even while tactics. Now the question really becomes, would I have a different tactics melee weapon to put in the A tier? Because if not, then this is like an A-tier tactics item. And when you're playing Brutality, it's also probably an A-tier Brutality item. So long as you're running Frenzy without Dead Inside. And that makes things kind of weird. Like, you could probably run Melee Mutation and actually get kind of decent at it. How in the world is Assassin better than Frantic? We have to really figure out which one of these deserves the A tier. That's what chat's trying to figure out right now. Frantic is just like you take 5 melees and it always works. So I guess that makes it better for a late game. But what if I never get to 5 melees? Like, I just found... Well, okay, so maybe I don't play Frantic correctly. Because I think it was Redbach on the Discord saying that they take Frantic Sword and then they eat infected food. And that's how they get the melees. I'm thinking it from the concept where I'm getting hit. I get the melees from the hits. And now I have to somehow maintain that with all this vegan, gluten-free food on the map. You get at least 1 per map, 2 if you can find the one in the wall. So, like, think about it that way. I feel like I never get to 5 melees, but I might just be playing it wrong. How do you manage melees at half? You manage it because you're playing tactics. Tell you what, I'll actually do this for now because I'm not entirely convinced on this item at all. So I will gladly make both of these a B tier. So at least, like, my concept of these are equal to each other will stand until I move something back up to A. Shovel, though. Shovel, previously a B tier. Shovel actually doesn't do really anything on its own. So I really can't have it as an S. But I actually think Shovel is probably one of the best brain-dead weapons in the game. And I'm all about brain-dead weapons. Like, anything that I don't need to think about is, like, golden. Shovel's also one of the few items that can get, like, the full rainbow of affixes to it. So it can get bleeding damage, poison damage, ice damage, fire damage, and I guess that's it. So you almost think about it from, like, an electric whip standpoint, where, yes, it does decent damage on its own, but it really shines if you can apply other stuff to it. Now, compared to Broadsword, however, I think I would still take Broadsword, unless, like, it doesn't have the extendo slow. I'll probably take Broadsword over Shovel. The only thing Shovel, like, technically does is knock back grenades. Like, Bombardiers, Hand the King. But I think it only knocks back 1 grenade per hit. I don't know if anyone can confirm that for me. But I'm pretty sure the last time I did Hand the King, it only knocked back 1 of the bombs. Rather than just shovel all of it. Just send, like, every single one over the fence. It does knock them all? Really? I would totally have to test that. Yo, Kev. Thanks for following. Welcome. I would say if it knocks everything, that it's probably like a low A. I still would take Broadsword over it every single time. The only time I would take this is if I don't have any other item. Shovel has saved me so many games. I think I'm gonna leave it as a B, because when you go into Giant, at least Shovel can kill the Giant. Like, yeah, it might be slow, but over every other... Well, actually, this is okay now. So it probably beats out half the roster for survival melee. So versus Giant, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything else is below shovel. If you're playing brutality, obviously versus giant is gonna be better than this. But I would take this over it. I would take this over it. It's really not that hard to catch the giant on fire. So I actually think this is perfectly fine where it is. But yeah, like I said, last one. And then we'll play some games. Spite Sword. Spite Sword, I previously had as an A tier. And I had it as an A tier because I felt that you need to hard block to win with it. And that the combo kind of sucks with the kick. The kick at the end of Spite Sword is the worst part about the Spite Sword. Now, it does have crowd control tied to it. Like, you're fighting a slasher. You do the 2 hits, dodge roll behind it, you kick it, it actually will stop the combo in most cases. Sometimes it's a struggle. But the kick, if it was anything else, say, for example, it even just did the 2 swipes. Like, if Evil Empire, if Motion Twin did a poll right now and just asked, hey V, what would you change about Spiteful Sword? I would say get rid of the kick. Just remove it. I know it does crowd control, but I'll do something else instead. I think if they did that, it would take it to an S tier. For me personally. So I actually feel like the kick is in there on purpose to prevent it from being an S. Now, I used to say that this thing is only an S when you have the shield. Because what you do is you just hard block an enemy, you get hit, or you jump into spikes with Masochist, you get the damage, and now all of a sudden you just take off. You just meltate monsters. I don't really do that in biomes. I mostly do it on bosses. But this thing shreds bosses if you actually get the crit. And I feel like I can't have it as an S until they get rid of the freaking kick. But I kind of think I'm gonna put it as an S. Just from the spirit of the Spite Sword. It even starts with an S. It starts with the letter S. How can it not be an S? It's that freaking kick. I'm telling you. If they got rid of the kick, might even be the triple S. But I'm not going to go that far. All I'll say is I actually like this thing as an S. And the reason why is when I have this, I rarely drop a game. Getting hit with Vengeance, amazing. Blocking with Vengeance, amazing. Blocking with Vengeance and Lacerating Aura, amazing. Blocking with Vengeance, Lacerating Aura, Spite Sword, Instincto. The actually, like, super good. Almost impossible to lose a game. Alright, so that's the block. I don't know if you all can see the damage. This is half melees, so I'm already taking bonus damage from being hit. But with Vengeance, I'm gonna get bonus damage. See, I'm already rocking 2 arrows worth of damage here. 1 hit, I got all my health back. If I had Lacerating Aura, it would have been even better. The rest of that I parry. Crit's still going. So forget about the amount of damage I dealt. Forget about like the fact that his whole HP bar is basically gone. But 1 hit in the beginning of the fight, I maintained the critical throughout the entire first phase. And I feel like that kind of gameplay makes this thing an S tier. Yes, you do have to have a shield to prevent death. But if you have Lacerating Aura, Well, not to prevent death. That's a little too strong to say. The shield is there so I don't take melees. If I didn't have a shield, I would probably still take the hit. Especially if I had Lacerating Aura, yeah, I eat that all day. Lacerating Aura will give you all your health back, and then you just go ham after. So, I think it's good. I actually think, so there's the post on Reddit talking about, you know, how to easily get to 4 BC the most brain dead way possible. I actually think Spite Sword, once you get to 4 BC, is probably one of the best tools for learning 4 BC. Because it helps when you get hit with Vengeance. And Vengeance comes from 4 BC anyway, I'm pretty sure. Maybe Berserk does. Someone can confirm that. We finally got the dark mode. Alright, so Valmont Whip. Valmont Whip used to be an S tier. Now, back in the day, we used to be able to double up on Valmont Whips, and I would still say that is the best melee setup in the game, is double Valmont Whip. But that is very rare now. It's kind of hard to get double Valmonts in version 1.6. So because it got nerfed, I can't bring myself to put that as an S tier, because that means you're chasing after a legendary. I think it's only an S in the double weapon scenario. But that's way too rare, that means we can't bank it. So if your build isn't working, like you're going tactics but no good weapons, what's the latest you say that you can switch? Switch colors, you mean? If I'm switching colors, like after Promenade, I'm gonna be down 2. You might be down 5 by then. I don't know if you can swap if you're leaving Promenade. I think by the time I get to Promenade, that build's locked in. One color or another. If I really, really couldn't find anything, like, A, I have to at Motion Twin and complain, and B, it's probably gonna just be struggle until I find the weapon and just stick to that color. So this thing got changed. It's no longer red-green in version 1.4, I think. They changed it to red-purple. The red Valmont Whip, I think, is still pretty useful when you put the melee mutation behind it. The purple Valmont Whip, I feel like, is not as good. It's still good, but I don't think it's as good as red Valmont Whip. I really don't want to put it down here, because I think I would take the Valmont Whip over this thing. I think I would take a purple Valmont Whip over this thing. I would definitely take a red one over this, and I would probably take a red one over this, but the purple Frantic is a little tougher. So I actually feel like the single Valmont is still pretty good, because it does everything that the double did, just a little, like, slower. And, like, less oppressive to the monsters. So it's like, it got balanced. And I think the balancing is enough to keep it as an A. I really think you just have to use the melee mutation. That's really all there is to it. By the time you pick this up and you go into Prison Depths, if you put melee mutation along with it, nothing in that biome can touch you. Be it elites, hammers, lacerators, doesn't really matter. You just whip all you can. What do you mean, Asunder? Good boss killing great in biomes. Yeah, and this thing's nice because it hits every boss. It's not like some of this other stuff that might struggle against bosses. At least, like, sometimes it's tough to hit the eyeball, but if you back up a little bit, it's actually good. Yeah, I did see that you finished your stuff and you put it in a nice playlist too. That's like actually huge. People don't realize that YouTube wants to keep people on YouTube as long as possible. So when you put stuff in a playlist and let it like continue to play after, that is very important. What's the spiciest placement so far? I think people don't appreciate the Frantic as a B. A lot of people want Frantic to be higher right now. Alright, Wrenching Whip. So Wrenching Whip, previously a D tier. Wow. Okay, so I remember this. Wrenching Whip in 1.4, I was so bored of Wrenching Whips. I absolutely could not stand to use another one. And before that, before a lot of weapons were released, almost Rise of the Giant. So like before Rise of the Giant, I was using Wrenching Whip like every single game, and I thought it was amazing. I am so sorry, Asunder. That's where they landed, but I'll talk about that after the Wrenching Whip. So Wrenching Whip, it actually has a good combo. Just like this thing, it has the kick at the end, and the kit has a crit tied to it. I think D is a little unfair. It's just with so many other red items, it's almost like, why would I take Wrenching Whip? Now, compared to this stuff here, I think I would take Wrenching Whip over a lot of this. So that makes me actually want to move this down. When you put the melee mutation with Wrenching Whip, it's actually pretty good too. Like, not a lot of monsters can survive the full combo of a Wrenching Whip. It goes through shields. The first couple hits ignore Ramus Reflect. It interrupts a lot of abilities, so like a shocker charging up. You have to be careful though, because some stuff won't actually get interrupted. I think back in 1.4, I just got really bored of it, especially with all this other cool stuff, like, namely, actually, I think it was partly double whip meta. In that mindset, there was like no reason for me to take any other whip besides Valmont whip. So I think for now, I'm gonna leave that as an A. Impaler. Wow, Impaler's that low? Rusty Sword does more damage than Impaler at base? Are you kidding me? Wait, that's a little, that's real interesting. So I used to really, really value this thing. I used to have it as a B tier. I think in my first tier list, it was A. Because you put the melee mutation with it, and no monster can defend themselves. And I think for the most part, that's still accurate because crowd control is like really powerful. But as far as like fighting a boss, if it's gonna take that long to fight Timekeeper with this thing, that's a problem. It's an A for reach and speed. I really do think it's an A in biomes. But I think against bosses, I would probably take Shovel over it. And that's possibly a hot take. So like averaging that out between A and C would probably make it a B. It does great damage though. Really? Because unless Rusty Sword does great damage, according to the numbers, and I thought it dealt good damage too. I agree with you, AK. I thought this thing was amazing. But unless this is wrong, I am a little concerned about this number on a boss. So I think melee mutation Impaler in biomes is an A. I think Impaler versus bosses is a C. Borderline D. I think it's a C because the combo is still good. Like against the giant, you can still hit the fists. You can still jump over Hand of the King's attacks and do some stabs on the way down. So I think all of that's still really good. But if that damage number is accurate, I don't think I can keep it as an A. Can you use it to hit Timekeeper against the wall? If she does her combo and throws herself into the wall, yeah. But it won't actually push her very far. Spartan Sandal pushes farther than Impaler. Hey, Liminal. So that's a thinkies right there. Will it get the crit? I've crit Concierge. When Concierge does the jump and rams himself into the wall, I've gotten crits on that wall. But that only occurs during the jump. So that means like during the first phase, you're not gonna crit ever. Conjunctivious, the only time you'll crit is when it's inside the platform. So you know it goes 360 degrees. If it's inside the platform, you'll crit. And then the tentacles, you can't crit them because they're never against the wall. Hand of the King, you will never crit that because there's no wall interaction with Hand of the King. So I actually like B. I'm really thinking about this though. I really am thinking about this, so that's a little spoiler for y'all. It doesn't need a crit. So my worry, AK, is in 5BC where I have like, I'm almost on a timer against like the giant or against Hand of the King. And the longer those stay alive, the more chance for error I have. So on a boss that is like a ticking time bomb, if the damage is truly lower than Rusty Sword, that is a problem. And I'd love to test it out. Like if I can find an Impaler today, I'd love to play it. Alright, Sadist Stiletto. Sadist actually got buffed. The buff they gave it was that it can now deal bonus damage to bleeding targets and bonus damage to poison targets. That was something that was initially banned on this. So previously, I had Sadist as an S. A lot of people actually didn't like Sadist Stiletto because the damage itself is pretty low. If I were to go back to the damage meter, it's actually like up here in the lowest tier. But obviously that's not what it's really for. It's for actually being able to hit stuff with an affix. I mean, with some kind of dot on it. So I actually think that because it got buffed, I think it's supposed to stay as an S. Now, the real issue with this is what's my dot source? Where's my poison? Where's my bleed? Now, remember, we're playing on 5BC. Even outside of 5BC, you can just go open wounds with red Impaler. Not Impaler, I'm sorry, red Stiletto. Open wounds with that is like the easiest thing you can do on the planet. Even when you're playing purple, I might still take open wounds, especially when I'm like running turrets and I'm not ready to take the support mutation. I'll actually run open wounds as purple just because I don't care what my mutation is. With brutality, I feel like open wounds is a no-brainer, but what makes open wounds with this thing so special is when you pair it with either the telluric shock or the phaser. That turns it into like a point and click bleed on the target. Because these two count as melee items, if you phaser onto a target, the phaser applies the bleed, and this will crit on the first hit, which almost turns this into a budget assassin dagger. But in my opinion, it's better than assassin dagger because it crits everything that can have a dot. So for example, giant, conjunctivious, all of that stuff that you can't backstab, you can apply the dot with open wounds. Now, in the case you don't want to go open wounds, you can do something like what AK is saying. You can run the newly buffed Blood Shield. You can run Kunai. You can run a Hokuto. You can like fish out for stuff that applies dot on hit. The purple Stiletto, I always try to fish out Poison Owls. If I can't get the Poison Owl, then I'll probably take something like the Knife Dance, or I'll just take a Corrosive Cloud. Like, worst case scenario is I can take Corrosive Cloud. Like, I always know I can get to a boss with some kind of dot. And if I don't, then I'm not chasing hard enough. And I know chasing isn't really a good reason for something to be an S, but what's in 5BC, that is, not in lower difficulties, because those you have less affixes to work with, so it might be a little harder to get those dots. But I'll even take it with Cleaver. I think Cleaver's an amazing item. Corrupted Power, that gives you poison in the higher difficulties. Poison surrounding your turrets. Like, in Tactics, it's so easy to get poison. Bleeding is another issue, but it's too easy almost. So I think I have to leave that as an S. If I were to bring it down, then I think I'd make some people upset. Not gonna lie. And I can't have anyone upset in here. Yeah, Carbine is another one. Carbine, I actually used to not really value Carbine that much, and chat actually turned me around to using Carbine more. And I feel better about it. I am a new man thanks to chat. War Spear, however, what can I say about War Spear? I used to use this thing back in like 1.0. I used to think this was amazing. Back when you had... Shoutouts to anyone old enough to remember this. Back when elites used to spawn minions. You had like a slasher elite with a whole bunch of zombos around it. War Spear was freaking awesome back then. And then they got rid of the zombie mob, and now War Spear has little to no value. What's nice about War Spear is if you try to stack minions on each other, you don't even have to really do that. You can just kill most monsters. But the issue is that unlike Broadsword, this thing has 0 elite one-shot capability. Always dies to bats. At least this thing can sometimes not die to bats. And then when we took this into the giant, actually awful. So really, I have to explain to you all, why is this thing not an F? And I think the reason why is that this thing can at least get me through prison quarters, promenade, and maybe prison depths. Like, if I get to prison depths and I haven't gotten rid of this yet, I feel like I'm already prepared to lose. Hopefully I can get through prison depths with this. Obviously, once you get to ossuary, it's kind of good again, but if you get to that one shocker that's on the pedestal, that you have to like jump on the shocker just to hit it, you're probably gonna get hit. And this thing has like crap for air stall, if I remember correctly, that flotation. So you'll try to hit it in midair and you have to do like this falling hit. It's ugly. Hopefully that's still like lacking in air stall. I think it's an F. Because I think, at least with Nutcracker, I can see myself taking Nutcracker to Hand of the King. But if I were to take this thing into Hand of the King, I would actually like be mad at myself. Yeah, it has very high base values. You're right. Let's check it out. 149. So is it like one of the top? Yeah, it's actually way up there. It's tied with Oil Sword. Are you kidding me? Freaking Oil Sword. Yeah, I just don't see myself using this over Nutcracker in Hand of the King. In all honesty, I never take that thing. If I take it, I'm probably in prison quarters. And that's as far as I'm gonna go with it. Rapier. Rapier. A lot of people actually like this thing. My experience with the rapier, oftentimes, like early in the game, when I take rapier, I pop off. Like, it's so beautiful. Poetry in motion when I take the rapier in prison quarters. When I take it into promenade, things start to get a little suspect, you know. Prison depths. If I don't have like an upgraded, like rank 7 rapier versus I get to prison depths, we're gonna have a bad time. It's pretty easy to get the crits off, so I don't really mind. I know a lot of people's problem with it is blowing a dodge roll just to crit. That's never been a really like big problem for me. My problem with it was not killing stuff in one combo. Like when you do a dodge roll through a hammer and you get it with all the hits and it doesn't die, that's annoying. So that to me makes it automatically not an S. Rapier crits on parry? Are you kidding me? Oh. Crap. Reading comprehension. Next level. Holy moly. Wow. See, I learned stuff from 800 hours in Dead Cells, and I just learned that this thing crits on parry. Huh. And we actually did get a newly buffed frontline shield. And frontline shield with that kind of gameplay sounds actually kind of good. And of course we have something like this where we say, yeah, once you get a shield with this, it becomes actually busted. I don't know if I'm willing to do that. And back when we made the 1.4 tier list, I actually had a lot of weapons in here that were purely speculative. Like when you put pen to paper, I think this is this rank. Conceptually, a shielded run in brutality, this could be kind of decent. I don't think I'm willing to make it as an S tier. I don't mind having it as an A. Worst case scenario, I play it, I'm wrong. Next tier list, it goes in the dumpster. The Timbos. Yo, who's used the Timberlands lately? I used to run Timbos like all the time, and then I fell out of love with it again, and it tanked on the tier list. And then I found out that melee mutation, honestly, melee mutation makes a lot of stuff so much better. But it's like these two. These were the comparison. It's like, in what world do I take spike boots over Spartan sandals? That's what I really want to know. Both of those you probably don't take into the giant fight no matter what. Either way, you're going Timekeeper. So it fights pretty much everything the Spartan Sandals does. But I feel like Spartan Sandals is better in every scenario. I guess what makes this nice is you're able to use mutations with it. Spartan sandals, the New Balances, you can't really use any melee brutality mutations with it because it doesn't really do anything with them. It doesn't really give you lifesteal because the damage is so low. It doesn't really slow enemies because they get knocked back anyway. Combo, yeah, it applies some bonus damage, but you're not trying to kick it to death. You're trying to kick it into the wall and then it dies. So I actually feel like this is good if you want to use melee mutations. But if you want to go just pure generic, you may as well just use Spartan sandals. So unless I can figure out some way that makes that better than Spartan sandals, then sure, I'll move spike boots up. The Air Jordans here. So we have New Balances, Timberlands, and then the Jordans. I used to actually be a huge fan of Jordans. I got 2 pairs of Dunk Lows over there in the corner. And that used to be all I wear, but nowadays, it's like, when you have all this other cool stuff, I just don't ever want to play this. What's fun about it is, again, taking the melee mutation, it turns every melee weapon into something usable. But even then, it's like, it's fun when it works, and when it doesn't work, it feels awful. 128, so it's a little below average. It's below Oil Sword without critting. I think this is the baseline right here. And it's an S rank item, but the non-critical damage is still better than most items. So what's this thing good at? What it's good at is being able to do the multi-hit, like the first 3 hits of the combo, roll behind the monster, do the backflip, and you actually apply melee mutation to everything around you. And doing that, yeah, plus the bomb repel. So that 4th hit is probably the most important piece of that entire weapon. I'd say that makes or breaks it, almost like this thing. The only difference with the twin daggers is it's so easy to just do 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. This thing, you're like 1 2, roll through, 3 4, knock away everything. Oh yeah, you just aggro the monsters that's behind it. Go to those, 1 2. The failed experiment is now awake that you left off because it didn't die because you only do 128. That thing's jumping at you. You roll again, either through the failed experiment or into more monsters. 3 4, get the knock up. By then, if the stuff's not dead, I probably alt F4. Not gonna lie. It's like, it's cool to look at, but when it doesn't work, I feel horrible having you all watch that. But I do take it. So I'm probably gonna keep it as a C. Now the question is, like, when you're playing brutality, do you really take that over a Nutcracker? I want to say no. I would probably take the Nutcracker. So there may be a potential where Nutcracker comes up into the C tier. But we'll see. I really gotta put some stuff in D right now. D is looking a little lonely. I wonder how that feels. That's a little bit of a demotion. Because again, it's like, if I'm gonna use this, I'm just gonna use Spartan Sandal. If I'm gonna use... See, but I kind of like it over this thing. For fun factor, I think this thing is much more fun than the Timberlands. And they look better too. Like, I don't know if you all have actually worn Timbos in 2020. Probably not, but I can say you're probably wearing a pair of Nikes right now. So it's like, maybe this does stay in the D tier. So let's keep it going. Converses, really? Yeah, I guess I've seen some people walking around with them. That's true. I've never worn a pair of Converses my whole life. Alright, Hayabusas. The gauntlets. The Hayabusa Knights on your fists. Previously an S tier. The reason why we had this as an S, the combo is super fast. You can cancel it whenever you want, so it's not like you're ever locked into a hit. The only thing you're locked out of are skills. Like, you have to purposely stop spamming to press your powerful grenade. It applies every single melee mutation in the game very well. The affixes it can get are either bonus damage at max HP, which works really well with Frenzy. You can get bonus critical damage. You can get oil. Like, you can actually, like, lube up your fists. We talked about this. We talked about boxers. Boxers putting the Vaseline on their knuckles or something. I don't remember what it was. But we talked about putting oil on your fists and then being able to, like, throw ice shards afterward. Or being able to... I don't know what you would do with oil on fists. But it can do that for some reason. I don't know why. And it has the flotation. So against monsters in the sky, against the giant, you can jump and punch. The damage of the Hayabusa is slightly less than the boots, but eventually you will crit. And the combo is significantly less annoying, I guess. So, putting all that together, looking at everything else here, I would still probably take Hayabusa gauntlets over a lot of this stuff. And honestly, like, these two things are probably on par with Hayabusa, like, just from a time to kill perspective. Like, if I walk up to an elite slasher, for example, like the most coveted elite in the whole game, everyone wants to be able to kill elite slashers, I would probably take any of these and be perfectly fine. But the difference is that once I get to certain bosses, this thing is just so easy to use that it's just not half bad. And you can say, okay, well, what about Balance Blade? That's the same thing, V. Like, why would you take Hayabusa gauntlets over the Balance Blade? And the reason is that this will crit every monster. Like, you'll probably 2-tap monsters with the Hayabusa gauntlets. Something like an elite golem, like Funsize is saying, you might have to do like 4 hits for it to die, compared to Balance Blade, where I might not even get to the golem by the time the crits are there. Against bosses, yeah, they're probably about the same thing. The difference is, it's the kind of gameplay, though. Like, the kind of gameplay on Hand the King using Balance Blade is different than Hayabusa. Even though, like, pen to paper, they look identical, you just hit it until it dies. Balance Blade does something to your mind. Balance Blade gives you some reason to keep swinging and possibly greed out. Or you could stop attacking, wait for the 3-hit combo to end, see what it's gonna do, you know, assess the situation, and there's no real loss of damage compared to using Balance Blade, where you're just gonna lose the crit. Oiled Fist with Flamethrower Turret, that's a good idea. I always think, like, I need to be able to throw ice shards, but again, you could just use Fire Grenade, Flamethrower, Corrupted Power that ignites oil around you. I guess that's redundant, but still, cool stuff. So I'm okay with having it as an S. Torch, however, and we are, we got about 20 minutes left, and we have a decent amount of weapons to go through, so this might be cutting it close. I might actually just do the rest tomorrow. Torch, however, Torch, I used to have it as an S, like way back in the day. And then in version 1.4, I said, you know what? Double Valmont meta? I don't think I want this anymore. I'd rather have any of this other stuff over a flamethrower. That's also when demons were released. Demons were everywhere, and you could not kill a demon with a torch. for the life of you. I mean, yeah, you can. If you beat a demon hard enough, it's gonna die. But the fact that demons were immune to this and we were going to caverns so much, that became a liability. I think now, demons have been nerfed, I think, 2 times. They got nerfed in quantity in High Peak Castle, and they got nerfed in the fact that they can't be protected by the training dummies. I like that fact. It still has a decent combo. And then against something like Conjunctivious, where sometimes you just get the 1 hit and it just leaves, at least it's still on fire, and you're still doing some kind of damage to it. And right now, I'm really trying to convince myself to make this thing an A. Like, I don't know why, I just don't like Flamethrower as an S. Maybe it's because it clashes with some mutations, I don't know. Just something about it doesn't want me to have it as an S, and I know that's not fair. Combos well with Oil Sword. I don't think I've ever used these 2 together. No, that's not true, I have. But most of the time, I just 2-tap the monster with the flame, and then it's probably dead. But what I should be doing, Gabriel, is I should probably 2-tap the monster, kill it with the oil, and then fight everything else. Only thing is, I'd rather just do that with the Molotov. This thing right here. I guess I can keep this as an S. What's really good about the Flamethrower is, again, no brain usage required. All you have to do is tag the monster, and at least it's doing its job. Compared to something like Bloodsword, where it's like I'm tagging the monster, but at what cost? And is it worth it? Probably not, in my opinion at least. Again, Veedotme tier list, that's not to say that you gotta go with these answers, but that's my thought on it. Would I take Torch over Broadsword and Valmont every time? If we think about winning games, if we think about like error prevention, I think Torch has more error prevention than this. Like, it's harder to screw up with a Torch. Valmont Whip, I would probably take a Valmont Whip over Torch. But I don't know if I could put it back as an S tier, because it was an S tier almost solely off Double Whip. And maybe Double Whip should have been triple S. Maybe that's the real answer. But for now, I think I'm gonna actually keep it here. And as we flesh this out, maybe stuff will move around. Alright, Meat Skewer. Okay. Hope y'all are ready for this. Buffed Meat Skewer. Meat Skewer got reworked 3 times now. We're on version 3.0 of the tier list. Well, tier list and Meat Skewer. I personally don't like the new Meat Skewer that much. I like the first hit. I don't care for the double tap after. And I have to explain myself for that. So the first hit gives you invincibility frames, which is ridiculous. So we have, let's go to Veedotme, well, twitch.tv/Veedotme/clips. Meat Skewer is actually legit busted. Die when I played that, so, because I actually want to just try stuff. Let's find out. Dumb. Oh my god, okay. That's sick. That is actually ridiculous. Wow. Yo. That I really like. And to say that the item is amazing because it gives you invulnerability, like, that's kind of a weird thing to even say. I don't want to just say Meat Skewer is all the iframes because I don't want it to get nerfed. I feel like if I said meat skewer was incredible because of that, it's gonna be like giga nerfed all the way down to F. But what I actually don't like about the meat skewer is that, and I tried this like for a long time, and again, it's probably, I actually have to learn how to use it, but meat skewer has a 3-hit combo. You slide through, and then you double tap after. Now, there's a certain amount of time that no matter what you do, the second and third hit always come out. So let's say it's, I'm just gonna throw out a number. I don't know if it's the right number, but let's say it's 5 seconds. If you slide through a monster, for the next 5 seconds, no matter what you do the double tap. That's a little, like, riposte, the little Raphael cosplay kind of deal. That is the part I hate. I feel like a 5-second lockout of doing another slide is very long. So I was going through Prison Depths, and you all know how I play. I just go like straight through. I don't care what's happening. No actual thought for my own life at that point. I just slide through monsters, and then I'm like, oh snap, there's a hammer in front of me. That's cool. I'm gonna slide through the hammer, double tap, and then slide for the next monster. Well, okay, I slide through the hammer, it dies. Awesome, I just killed the hammer. Now there's a slasher in front of me, and my next attack is only the double tap. And I have to remember that, oh snap, I can't slide again. All I can do is actually double tap. So that piece of it, say like Spite Sword. Here's a perfect example. Imagine if Spite Sword, after you attack twice, for the next 10 seconds, all you can do is kick. That would make this item actual garbage, because that kick is the worst part of the whole combo. So why am I locked into that kick for so long? I feel like meat skewer, to me at least, and again, I know a lot of people think this is like the new hotness. It is really cool to look at, I agree. For me, it's not an S. For me, I don't even know if it's an A. I'm probably gonna keep it as an A only because I'm not used to it yet. But that lockout has gotta go. Again, my issue, I think also I have to run combo. So for anyone who wants to run this thing, initiative as tactics, incredible. Like being able to one-shot something off the slide and then one-shot the next stuff off the double tap is actually really good. As brutality though, brutality doesn't have initiative. What it has instead is combo. And I think combo really shines with this thing. You don't use combo a lot in 5-cell, but sometimes you have to. And I think this is one of the scenarios where you do that. Alright, let's get started. Swift Sword. Swift Sword I previously had as the S tier. This one chat was a little confused about back then. They were saying like Swift Sword needs velocity. Swift Sword, you can't crit on bosses. So like, why in the world do you have this thing as an S tier? My personal opinion is that clearing biomes for free. Let's say, for example, you had an item, almost like Assault Shield. Assault Shield does stuff that nothing else does. Rampart does something that nothing else does. I feel like Swift Sword also just about falls in that category of it does something that no other weapon does in the game, where you take it into a biome and you mow through the entire thing relatively for free. And by relatively, I mean if you were to take something like the Berserk mutation, chances are you're never gonna get hit by melees. If you take Frenzy, you'll get all your health back by the time you end the biome. I consider, and again, let me I put it out there every single time we do the tier list. This is a Veedotme tier list designed for 4BC+. So, not to say that this stuff can't work in the other divisions, but I'm taking this from my own perspective. You can use this as like an introspective, like to V's brain. Like, I got brain cells firing off. It's just telling me grab Swift Sword and just run. That's what my brain's telling me to do. And when it works, S rank item. So then it becomes V Swift Sword doesn't work on bosses. And I can't argue with that. It doesn't crit bosses. I will concede that, sure. The only way you can crit a boss with Swift Sword is if you take Alienation. Not Alienation, I'm sorry. If you take Masochist and get hit by a spike. Getting hit by a spike gives you the move speed bonus, and then you can crit on bosses if you really wanted to that badly. Or you could have like the crystals fall from the sky during the giant. Or if you're like really good at killing tentacles, you could get... Actually, you don't even need to get the speed bonus from killing all like 5 tentacles. You can get an item like infantry, grenade, phaser, that kind of stuff, where on kill you get a speed bonus. That speed bonus does count towards the Swift Sword, and you can use that to crit the boss. So there's multiple ways to get the crit bonus. It doesn't have to be killing a ton of monsters. 60% of the time it works every time. That sounds right to me. Damage wise though, this thing 138, I think it's actually like the number 10 highest DPS weapon, non-critical. So it's actually just 6 points. Maybe call that like 10%. I know it's less than 10%. But that's just a few percentage points below Shovel that does basically the same thing as a Swift Sword, except it has a little bit of crowd control tied to it on a boss. So remember, we actually put Shovel in the B tier because it's super generic and actually works in all circumstances of the game. Swift Sword, I feel like, is Shovel, plus it does more by giving you that free biome clear. So I actually still continue to believe that this is an S rank item. Now compared to all this other stuff, yeah, if I get like a full fire setup, maybe I'll take the oil sword over it. If I get the like a Hokuto that has poison on hit combined with the knife dance, yeah, I'll probably take this thing. If I got a shield that absorbs 7% and it's legendary, so I get a ton of health and red out of it, yeah, I'll probably use Spike Sword. But in all of those circumstances where I don't have that other piece, I would probably take Swift Sword over like 90% of the roster down here. To be honest, I don't even take Velocity when I use Swift Sword. 90% of the time, you will not, well, more than that. I don't think you'll ever see me run Velocity unless I'm actually speedrunning. The only time I take Velocity is in a speedrun scenario. Otherwise, I'm running something like Frenzy, Berserk, Dead Inside, or Instincto, Frenzy, Dead Inside. You could go Instincto, Melee, just in case you don't want to get melees off bosses, and then something like Soldier. Really, I only go Frenzy, Dead Inside, or I'll go Soldier, and then like full red mutations. Could I use Velocity? I certainly could. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with playing Velocity. But me personally, I never go into a biome and think I won't have a speed bonus. And that's just my own gameplay. Like, Maybe that's the amount of hours or something, I don't really know. But typically, when I go into that biome, I just go. The only time I stop is when I have a curse. And even when I'm cursed, like, if that biome isn't filled with demons, arbiters, that kind of stuff, I'm still going at full speed ahead. If I find anything remotely dangerous, I'm probably gonna toss a grenade at it. Oh, I have to do Symmetrical Lance too, because I skipped it. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Swift Sword. It's gonna continue to be an S in my eyes. The only way this thing will not be an S to me is if they nerf the non-crit damage. They actually buffed this back in 1.2, I think. It used to be a lot less than 138, but it actually got buffed. If they wanted to nerf this, if they think that this is too strong, it probably just needs to be brought down for the non-crit. Alright, so, Symmetrical Lance. So, Symmetrical Lance, and you want to think about this from almost well, maybe not just 3 items, probably more like 4 items. So, this, compared to this, compared to this, compared to this. Symmetrical Lance is basically a broadsword that works off kills. Is that a good way to describe it? Inflicts a critical hit for 6 seconds after you quickly kill 2 enemies. So it's not like Impaler where the enemies have to be stacked up on top of each other. You just have to like go through the full combo and kill 2 things. And after that, you'll crit. When you don't have that, it's a War Spear. Now, damage-wise, of course it is stronger. 168 is one of the strongest, like, single-hit items in the game. But for the hassle of the combo, especially on something like Timekeeper, you take this thing into Timekeeper, actually horrible. You take this into, oh, the Giant. I think this is it right here. Yeah, it is. So, Symmetrical Lance versus the Giant. And obviously you can say, well, just don't go Giant, go with Timekeeper instead. But the concept here is that Timekeeper is just as bad. So there's multiple issues with Symmetrical Lance. One is, as you just saw, no air stall on the first hit. And even if you try your best to time it, you're losing like a whole 3 seconds just to do this one attack. So, a minute 5, I get 1 hit. Oh, but I have to go through all this crap. Alright, minute 9. Minute 12. I lost a whole second there. So, in the course of... Wow, I still can't hit this thing. Oh, okay, there we go. We finally hit this thing like 9 seconds later. And I missed, what, 4 swings? And again, you can say, well, just don't go Giant. Go Timekeeper instead. So Timekeeper, you'll hit her with the first strike. Let's assume you're using a shield. Hit her with the first strike. She does her bull crap. You try to block it. You go for that second swipe, you may have already lost the combo at that point, and she might be vanishing and going to the other side of the map, or she might be running past you and trying to do her like triple combo. But the usual the usual case is that she's in the corner, she threw shurikens at you, you blocked all of it, you go for the 1 horizontal slash, you hit her, she's gone. So in that scenario, it's worse than Broadsword, because if you can even land the first hit of the Broadsword, you can probably carry the combo to the next hit once she gets to the other side of the map. And that second hit is infinitely stronger than this thing is going to be. Shovel, though, all of those attacks on Giant would have hit. I think it's still better than War Spear, though. But compared to Nutcracker, I would probably replace this thing with the Nutcracker as soon as I find it. And I'll just go for that being the build. So this, in turn, becomes a placeholder item. And I really like this section to be placeholder items, where, yes, it can get me through a biome. Yes, worst case scenario is I can probably kill something with it. But as soon as I get any remotely decent piece of equipment, this thing's going in the trash can. Not even recycling. Like, actually going to contribute to global warming with every single symmetrical lance I've thrown away. Giant Killer. See, I already have Nutcracker on my brain now. You all have got me, like, all bent out of shape over this Nutcracker. Giant Killer, I previously had as an A tier. And that was because Giant Killer itself got a nerf where the non-critical DPS is at 127. It's actually lower than the Swift Sword. It's lower than Hayabusa boots. So, the concept here is that this thing is worse at getting through biomes than Hayabusa boots. And if that's the argument, sure, I would agree with that. So definitely not an S. But the idea here is, what does this thing do? And does it do what it does well? So one thing it does really well is one-shot elites. So the combo that has, it's like a 4-hit combo. It's 2 horizontals. No, it's 3 verticals and then 1 stab. And for the most part, that stab can one-shot every elite in the game. Now, I don't want to say that's a total exaggeration. It's close. But by the time you find this, for example, you find this in a 60 door, this will probably one-shot every elite in the game with the 4th hit. All you do, and we learned this from Forza's stream, all you do is you prep up the combo, roll into the boss so you aggro it, and then you press square for the 4th hit, the stab, and it will probably die. From prison quarters all the way to observatory. So that is like actually really good. No other weapon in here except Broadsword does that. So I value that pretty highly. And then on bosses, it hurts, especially once you get like bonus damage to bleed, bonus damage to poison. Never take open wounds with this though. This is like the only case scenario where I may consider a blood sword on the offhand. But chances are I'm just going to take kunai if I really want that. But I'm probably just going to go knife dance or cleaver. Chances are it's cleaver and not knife dance. Knife dance is cool though if you're running Instincto with the Giant Killer. Hey, Henny. But yeah, this thing turns boss fights, like this 6-minute long giant fight could have easily been 1 minute tops with a Giant Killer. Timekeeper, you don't even need to land all the hits. If you can just try to maintain the combo, if you can just get her one time with the 4th hit, you'll be surprised at how many seconds you save off that fight. For example, again, she's in the corner, you do the parry spam, you tag her with the 1 hit, she teleports to the other side of you, roll over, try to get that 2nd hit if you can. If you can't, it's fine, because if your combo starts over, you still do good damage. It's not like this other crap that doesn't happen. But at least Giant Killer has that going for it. And like Gabe was saying in the chat here, it does kill most monsters if you do the other pieces of the combo. Of course, if you want to actually prep that up, that will slow your gameplay a little bit. But it's survival. Survival usually isn't made to be the fastest clears in all the land. But when you want to talk about like increasing your win rate, so if you were to pair these two together, for example, let's say you did like some global tests. You want to measure like what's the win rate of these 3 items. I would say this is probably the lowest win rate, followed by this, because people will use this until they win. And then after that, well, definitely not a C. This thing isn't a C. I'm almost looking at it to be a B, because honestly, I don't really use giant killers anymore. Again, that's another item I kind of fell out of love with, but it's definitely better than a shovel. Well, not definitely. I'd say for win rate, it's probably going to be higher than a shovel. But I'm almost wondering about putting this down and bringing this down. But I think I like it as an A right now. It's still really good. Using it in biomes, as long as you're not like mobbing the whole map or something, not that bad. And when you take good skills like Telluric Shock and Powerful Grenade, or Telluric Shock and Giant Whistle, that's how you clear a biome. This thing, yes, it will kill stuff, but if you want to actually win the game, you pair this with something to clear a biome. But that's basically my synopsis for the Giant Killer. It's really good, and it's not good enough to be an S because it doesn't do bosses as well as some of this stuff, in my opinion. But it still does elites, bar none, better than everything else. You just have to use Telluric Shot, and if you can do that, you're golden. Next, Shrapnel. Crap. Alright. Shrapnel Axe. So, previously, I had this thing as an A tier, actually. That's not half bad. Shrapnel, I actually, and this is gonna be like really tough to say to people, I think Shrapnel has the best combo in the game, next to Hayabusa gauntlets. I think like nuts to bolts, pen to paper, Shrapnel Axe's combo is as good as Hayabusa. I almost feel like it's better than Hayabusa's combo, but I can't say that because Hayabusa's just a muda muda. Like you just keep going that whole time. So in terms of like weaving attacks, using stuff like light speed, phaser, Telluric Shock, one of my favorite builds actually is Killer Instinct Shrapnel Axe with Telluric Shock. And all you do is you jump on monsters constantly, and then if Telluric Shock's on cooldown, you just start chopping up stuff. You can also do that with Hunter's Instinct, but typically I just go with Killer Instinct. Here you go, start. Boom. Easy. I did that in 3 seconds. So, Shrapnel Axe. The weaknesses of Shrapnel Axe. So, the weakness would be that the melee damage, let's take a look at it. 157? That can't be right. That must be the range DPS. There's no way that's the melee. 130 damage. I have no idea how they got 157. I feel like it can't be that strong. Stronger than Oil Sword? Stronger than Shovel? I don't know if I believe that. If that's the case, then I would say that is an S rank item. In all honesty, I don't really care about the ranged aspect. Typically, when I'm playing Shrapnel Axe, I'm taking open wounds and I'm just sitting on top of the monster. Because the combo is so good, and it can get bonus damage to bleeding, and this thing can roll like poison on hit and stuff like that, I think you just sit on top of monsters and you just spam auto attacks. And because the combo is so good, you can dodge mid attack. You can attack in the air. This thing kills Giant, kills Handed King, kills Conjunctivious. It kills every boss. It fights every monster in biomes. It just doesn't crit. That's the only thing it doesn't do. The thing about Shrapnel Axe is that all the DPS is on the 3rd strike. I think this thing's a 5-hit, like a 5-hit combo. And most of the time, I don't even get out the 5th hit. I'm just like floating back and forth. It's almost like Devil May Cry. This is like the Devil May Cry of Dead Cells weapons, where you're doing like the attacks on the ground, get the launcher, do stuff in the air, tag out, bring your assist in, do another combo, active tag in your next thing. Like, that's what the Shrapnel Axe does to me. And again, Veedotme tier list, if you don't agree that this thing is an S, that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with that. Does it kill bats? It does, because you can use it in the sky. The only negative I see to this is that last hit. Almost like the Spite Sword. The issue with the Spite Sword is the last hit. And I almost feel like that is balance. If the kick was gone from Spite Sword, triple S. If the final hit was taken off of Shrapnel, and they like move that damage throughout the rest of the combo, maybe not a triple S because it can't crit, but 100% in the S tier. Right now, I'm like 95% sure it should be. But the next item on the list is Seismic Strike. I actually used to really love Seismic Strike. Dead Cells tier list finale. Season 3. AKA Season 6 in the OCG. So Seismic did get a buff. Version 1.6, if you want to use Seismic Sword, you pair this with the new mutation called Heart of Ice. I don't think I brought it in because I don't really care about mutations right now. But it actually got a buff where the second attack you do with the Seismic Strike on a monster that you don't one-shot will give you like 3 seconds of cooldown reduction. And that's actually pretty good. Like, when you think about using survival stuff like the Giant Whistle, like the Crusher, Wolf Trap, I even saw, there was a Reddit post today where someone was saying that they took Heart of Ice with Ice Grenade and Freeload. Now, me personally, I feel like that's a lot of work over just doing like any of this other green stuff. And by this green stuff, it's really only this that's right here and this. So I'm not 100% sold on the green Seismic Sword. I think it is really good. It's 10 times better than it was in the past. In the past, I had this thing as a C tier. So I'm willing to concede it into the B position, saying that Seismic Sword is better than Nutcracker. That's how I feel about it. Now, whether it belongs to be higher than that, I don't think so. And the reason why is that A, it doesn't crit. B, the first strike is kind of decent, but all the next strikes are very slow. And on anything not called Timekeeper, it's a little tough. Compare it to Nutcracker, where you can just do at least the first couple hits and maintain the combo. With Seismic Strike, you're not probably maintaining that combo. But what you will get is CDR on your Giant Whistle. You can kind of do the same thing with Nutcracker if you run Wolf Trap plus Heart of Ice. But in biomes, I'm not spamming Wolf Traps. I'm only using Wolf Trap on bosses and elites. I think what would make this actually good is a buff, attack speed buff, because the attack speed of this thing's hot garbage. I think I'm going to leave Seismic Strike as a B because I think it's okay with the buff. I just need to be able to get some more games in with this. We have beaten the game using this before, and it did feel pretty good. Actually, maybe that's a C, because I didn't beat the game until I had like a 2 mutation, 2 skill setup. That was like Wolf Trap, Giant Whistle, Heart of Ice, Frostbite. When I put those 4 together, I actually got some stuff out of it. Next, we got the Flawless. And Flawless, wow. So you all really, really wanted me to get this out of the meme tier. I considered Flawless a meme item because Flawless is amazing when your gameplay is perfect. Just like Cursor. Cursor is incredible when your gameplay is perfect. And I don't know if it's right to measure that. A lot of people in chat came in and said, you know, it's still really good. Even when you're not perfect. Let's say you're perfect for half the time. I don't know if that's a... See, it's hard to measure that too. Because, like, does that mean during the boss? Did you fight the boss for 50% of its health bar, and then after that, you got hit and never had to crit again? Because I would still consider that, well, to be fair, that's actually equal to Hayabusa Gauntlet. Hayabusa Gauntlet is good all the time, but it's excellent on bosses at 40% of the time. Whereas this thing is only good until you get hit. So I can't put it in situational either, because situational to me is not weapon dependent. It's, well, it is weapon dependent, but it's not gameplay dependent. It's build dependent. And then I feel like even if it was in the A tier, that means that I could probably win the game with this all by myself. Without using much of other stuff. And I feel like that's not entirely true unless I played perfectly, which is the same thing as Cursor. Unlike Cursor, your run doesn't end with Flawless. You just have a 15-second cooldown on crits. That's true. Its damage isn't too bad when not critting. So this thing's at 104. It's actually weaker than Rusty Sword. Rusty Sword's stronger than Flawless. Perfect for half the time is like basic gaming ability. That's not a bad argument. I actually like that. I'm biased against Flawless. That's probably accurate. I will not deny that fact, Kellen. I am a Flawless hater. We did play Flawless here, I think. Maybe not. Never mind, false alarm. That might be a spoiler for the next video coming out. So I've played it. It is fun. It's just, from a tier list standpoint, let's say I was to tell somebody, like, hey, Veedotme, how do you get the 5th boss cell? Would I tell them to take a Flawless? Probably not. And that's half the problem. Is that I don't know if someone was to ask me, how do I get through the game? I would probably not tell them to take Flawless. I don't want to say the mini game behind Flawless, but if you don't do that gameplay, then it's a worse Rusty Sword. Except for like the first couple hits. Like the first couple biome hits, you'll actually hit it. All I'm saying is that I can't measure this thing. I can't for the life of me put a real measurement that I can believe in. And I refuse to put it as a C. Alright, so I'm gonna keep Flawless in the meme tier for now. Again, I think it's still good. it's really hard for me to measure it. And maybe during lightning round, I'll do something about that. All right, we got 10 minutes left. I'm supposed to save 5 minutes for lightning round. Vorpan. Vorpan has horrible reach. It's probably, I don't know why, but I feel like it's shorter reach than Assassin Dagger. That's probably not true. I'm sure it's equal distant to each other. But this probably has the shortest reach in the game. I almost feel like Hayabusa gauntlets attacks farther. This thing gives you like a step forward on each punch. So that's probably why this seems longer. Vorpan also does not crit conjunctivius. And then a lot of the bosses that you're fighting, say Concierge, most of the time you don't fight bosses from the front either. Now previously I had Vorpan in the A tier. And I really do like Vorpan. Vorpan does some stuff in biomes. Especially when you pair it with something like the Grapple Hook. I feel like Grapple Hook Vorpan is actually super strong. But in regards to fighting bosses, be it Giant, Timekeeper, all that stuff, you can get a couple crits off, but fighting those monsters, namely Hand the King and Timekeeper from the front, is really tough. And then fighting Conjunctivius and Giant don't crit at all. I would take Vorpan over Boots. I would take Vorpan over this in red. Obviously, these two are both green, so that makes it a little tougher. I don't think Vorpan is actually that bad. I just think it's really... I think if they want to buff the Vorpan, just let it crit the Giant's eyeball and Conjunctivius, which is another eyeball. I think if you crit those, this is good enough to be maybe an A, maybe not. It's probably still justified to be a B. I don't think with the range of this thing, compared to like, so you're fighting Bombardiers, for example. Bombardier is a perfect example of a monster you have to chase after just to hit it with a Vorpan. I don't know if you all know what I'm talking about, but a lot of ranged monsters jump away as you get close. And that with the Vorpan feels awful. That's why I normally take stuff like this. Knife throwers do that too. The invisible dudes. Or they could be chicks. I don't know what a knife thrower is. But what they do, they throw daggers. You get close, they just jump away. It's good enough to win. It's better than the other placeholders. That's for sure. But I don't think it's a C for situational because I don't need 5 items or 5 mutations to make this work. Worst case scenario is I take a grapple hook. So it's almost like a shovel to me, where it's a very generic item, but sometimes it's actually really good. On like an elite lacerator, you can just beat him. Bop, 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 just beat him. And normally it dies. That's all it can do though. It can't really do much else besides that. All right, we got 2 more. Tentacle. Tentacle, I have tried time and time and time again to make Tentacle work. And by work, I mean I want to actually win without an issue. And whenever I play Tentacle, it's always issues. I have yet to have a Tentacle game where I said that item was by far the best thing I could have picked up. I don't even think... So, the Tentacle build that prevents death is possibly the Apex Predator. So say, for example, you have Predator, you don't want to play Dagger. You don't want to play Frantic Sword. You don't want to play Meat Skewer. I'm invisible on every kill, I want to play Tentacle. I don't even think that's right. I think it's actually just a placeholder. When do I take Tentacle? I take Tentacle in Prison Quarters, Promenade, Toxic Sewers, Corrupted Prison. I do not take it in Prison Depths. I will take it... You can't take it in Stilt Village, too. If you try the Spider-Man onto a gangplank, you can actually get shot during the Spidey sling. If you go... What's the other route? Slumbering Sanctuary. Slumbering Sanctuary, you can kill everything, but you have to dodge roll the golem's first punch. So a good measurement to me on how good a weapon is in Slumbering Sanctuary is if I can kill a golem on spawn. And a lot of this stuff can do that. Obviously, some of the lower DPS items here require a couple of hits to do it. But some stuff just needs to be ramped up. And by the time you get to the golem, it'll die. Tentacle, however, it won't kill the golem, and you have to dodge the first hit. You can't even lead the fight with a punch because it can punch you mid-flight. Or it'll do the down slam. Now, what I don't know is if the down slam can hit you mid-flight. That is something that I'm willing to test, but chances are it hits you. Giant. Giant was another fight that we took this into, and it was actually awful. For some reason, Tentacle does not play well with the Giant. When you Spidey sling to the fist, it will actually send you down to the floor, and then it'll send you through. And there's some weird flotation behind it too. So even though it can clear like up to the first boss, after that, I gotta toss it. And that in itself, to me, is being called a placeholder. Won't suck anymore if it got iframes. Meat Skewer has iframes. And it's an A tier right now, until Lightning Round. I would say Meat Skewer 3.0 is a better Tentacle. So Flint was previously an A rank. I experimented a lot with Flint between the last patch. And we tried a lot of different things. We found out that you can phaser. You can actually use phaser while charging the Flint, and you won't lose the crit. You'll actually teleport onto an enemy and crit. We found out that you can grapple hook. Grab an enemy, not losing the crit, and kill it. We found out that you can do like Flint going up a ledge. You can jump off a ledge and charge the Flint. And that's all well and good. But in terms of a tier list, I'm not sure if that kind of gameplay wins you games. It can. It certainly can. But I think that's all it can do. Taking it into the bosses, it can kill bosses. You can, just like Shrapnel Axe, you can attack at range. You don't really have to interact with the boss. You just hit it with the flame. And that, like you're playing League of Legends, you just hit them with the flame and they just die. It takes a little while though, longer than using any of this other stuff. You can also pair this with Instinct Master of the Arms, that's Instincto, for those who don't know. And it's okay, but like, or I could just play Giant Killer with crit. Or I could just play Broadsword or Valmont with crit. I don't know if I particularly want to use a Flint with Instincto. I'd probably take something else. And that's coming from someone that loves the Flint. This is one of my favorite items, just from a fun perspective. But I think if someone, again, going back to what we were saying about Flawless, if someone in chat was to ask me, hey, would you recommend that I use the Flint to get my 5th boss cell? I'll probably tell him no. Him or her, no. It's just too much work when you could just take like a shovel and probably do the same thing in the same amount of effort. Well, less effort, equal time. Now, am I willing to make this thing a C? That's kind of tough. I'm almost in the belief that it should, only because of the Flint game with Phaser with grapple hook. I think it needs mutations to make it actually worthwhile using. And if you don't have those mutations, then you might suffer. And I'm an advocate for the Flint. Like, I want people to try the Flint. I'm just not willing to tell people use it to get your 5th boss cell. That's basically where I'm at right now with this item. It's good, clean, family fun. But after that, I don't know if I would trust it to win me the game. Here's where we stand right now. We have 2 promotions, and I'm still gonna do lightning round. I'm gonna take a good 3 to 5 minutes on a timer to go through the whole thing, make any adjustments I can feel, and then that'll be the locked in final. So 2 promotions, demoted. I guess it's better to do it off this. Demotion, promotion, demotion, promote, down, up, stay, up, stay, down, down, big promotion on this, and a big promotion on this. So there's a lot of things, yeah, humongoid promotions here. And basically this came from the standpoint that I value things differently now. Not like totally differently, but I value being able to one-shot an elite very highly. I value that map-wide slow pretty highly. And I value big damage on bosses pretty highly. Not to say that low damage is bad, like average damage is still okay. But below average, like, what was it that we saw that had less damage than Rusty Dagger? Something in here had less damage than Rusty Dagger on bosses, and that felt awful. So, let's try to do 3 minutes on a timer. And I'm just gonna go through what I think about this stuff and try to move things along as I can. Alright, starting now. Actually, no, I think I know what to do. I think I know what to do. It's this. Is there a ranking with these tiers too? No, Start. People have asked in the past, can I rank them from left to right? But I decided not to do that because it takes me 3 days to do this as is. Alright, here we go. Boom, 3 minutes. Alright, I still really like this as an S rank. This to me is still, it's freewins.com. Even though it requires other stuff, a mutation, and maybe a shield, I feel like if you take that, your win rate skyrockets, and I value that very, very highly. This thing got a buff. It was previously an S tier, and I have to keep it as an S because it got the buff. This thing has one of the best combos in the game. It honestly does nothing wrong. It just doesn't crit for the first half of the fight. If you can get through that half, awesome. Torch? I don't know if I really want Torch to be an S. I think it's good, but that's all it does. And if I'm gonna take something for fire, I'm just gonna take a mutation. I mean, not a mutation, a skill, I'm pretty sure. Swift Sword, the exact opposite of Spite Sword. This thing gives you a free pass through the biome. This gives you a free pass through bosses. Giant Killer. Easy boss fights, one-shot elites, super good. Just have to get something to kill biomes. This kills everything in the game except Giant. This is just about good at everything it does. Doesn't do a lot wrong. This thing kills everything. It has a little bit of gameplay behind it. Once you get over that, I think it's super good. This got nerfed because you can't use 2, but I think it's still really good. This is a concept. You're able to block and parry. I think because the Brutal Shield got buffed, block, parry, stab is probably good. This I need more time with, but I show the challenge rift actually busted. This thing I had some games with. I think this is not the kind of gameplay that wins. Yeah, it can get you the Reddit karma all day with this, but my win rate with this is not very high. This super generic, doesn't really do anything wrong. It's just if I find any of this stuff, I'll probably take it over this. But it's not quite placeholder level because I'll take it over this stuff. Frantic, super good once you get that half malaise. I just don't know if I would tell people to do that on average. This thing, I think it's still good with the melee mutation. You're able to kill almost every biome monster without it interacting with you. It just struggles on bosses. This is the same way. Kills every biome monster. You just have to get in range of it, and chasing down ranged monsters is awful. This, the most generic, no brain power required weapon in the game. I value that highly, actually. And it deals bonus damage to all affixes. I'm gonna have to actually add some minutes. Because I talk too much. Air Jordans, pair it with some brutality mutations. I think it's actually pretty good. Nutcracker, I still can't justify putting it in the B tier. Only because this with Wolf Trap, in my opinion, is better than Nutcracker. This with Wolf Trap, still not better than Broadsword, but it's about as equal as this because of the damage reduction. This thing, I think it's fun. I think it can win games. I just don't think I would recommend people do it without having a bunch of stuff behind it. This gets you up to prison depths, and if you don't toss this before prison depths, you're gonna struggle. This is okay, but I'd rather take almost every item in the game. It's just not interesting. Pairing that with melee mutation, it's okay, but again, I could use this with melee mutation if I wanted. I could use this with melee mutation if I want. Tentacle kills stuff in prison quarters. I don't really care about it after that. Another thing, you die in prison depths. This thing, I'll probably never take it because it deals rusty sword levels of damage. 89 damage when you don't crit. I feel like just trying to load up the hits, getting to 10, if I hit one thing with any of these items, already superior to the Balance Blade. This I'll never put in the offhand. I'd rather use any other bleeding source in the game. This, same as these, except I would take this over it. Flawless. Flawless, if you're playing perfect, it's an S. If you get hit a lot, it's probably a C, where it's good because you stopped. So if I were to average this out, it's between an A or a B. If I were to just put it somewhere, I would probably put it as a B, only because A is saturated right now. I'd say there's two versions of this tier list. There's this one that you're looking at right now, Torch got demoted, and then there's this version that has this as a mean tier. If I main hand Flawless with average gameplay, it's probably a B. Alright, so again, thank you everyone for joining in on the tier list. Now, let's... Oh yeah, I have to save. Crap. Here I am loading up Dead Cells, and I forgot the rest of this. Save. Dead Cells Melee 1.6. We save that. Oh, and I have to actually post it to the chat bot.